All right, everyone, welcome back to Talking Soccer. I'm your host, Justin Horniker, and today we're talking the women's soccer transfer, rumor, hot stove, whatever you want to call it. It's the holiday season. I'm in a giving mood. The women's soccer world is in a giving mood with, we have some important names to discuss. And if you're one of those weirdos that just comes into my comments anytime I talk about women's soccer, I'm just going to have to ask you to not today. All right. We have that understanding, so let's move forward. Debinha has announced that she is not signing in North Carolina, which is big news. And maybe not all that surprising. I think prevailing sentiment was that Debinha was out of North Carolina. She probably doesn't work this hard for free agency, to experience free agency for the first time in her career, and she's an international footballing superstar. She probably doesn't re-sign in North Carolina even under the best of circumstances, regardless of where that club is front office-wise these days. But we have kind of a heating up of the rumors that Debinha is going to leave NWSL. I don't think it's a given. Obviously, I think every team in the league is making their pitch to sign her, but there have been some loud noises coming from the Women's Super League, coming from Ligue 1. Women's Super League wise, Arsenal have been really heavily rumored, at least since being in talks with Debinha, especially with the Beth Mead injury looking like a torn ACL diagnosis, and with their Champions League knockout stage games coming up in February, they probably desperately need a creative attacking midfielder like Debinha. She would make any team in the world better, and that is not lost on Arsenal, which is arguably, along with Chelsea, along with Barcelona, probably the best teams in the world right now, along with PSG, of course, and Bayern Munich, Wolfsburg. List goes on. But, those are the names that we're talking about, approaching Debinha. Another name for the Women's Super League is Manchester United. Now, Manchester United don't have Champions League soccer to offer Debinha, at least not this year, but their pitch is going to be centered around the fact that they would like to challenge Arsenal, they like to challenge Chelsea, and Debinha is a player to bridge that gap from 3 to 2. You look at the Women's Super League, and there's a clear delineation between your Arsenal, Chelsea, and then United, Man City, everyone else. There really is a clear line of delineation there, and Manchester United and Manchester City are both trying to kind of bridge that gap up to the top two. And maybe some would argue that Manchester United is there already, but obviously Arsenal and Chelsea, for as close as the table race is right now, do appear to be the more talented teams. And that would maybe be Manchester United's pitch, and maybe Debinha likes that. But the other name heavily linked to her is Barcelona. And Barcelona can offer a couple of things that Manchester United can't, one being Champions League football. They also have a knockout stage game coming up in February, just like Arsenal. But they also have fellow Brazilian international forward WoSo, who would be a familiar face for Debinha. And I think that's something that, for Debinha, for a Brazilian international, she's talked about wanting to play with her countrywoman before, and I think that is the play that makes Barcelona a favorite there as well. If Debinha is to leave the NWSL, I think that Arsenal and Barcelona are definitely the two kind of top names on my list that I would see her go to. Situation is incredibly fluid. It's not a foregone conclusion, but is looking more likely that Debinha pops up in London or in Barcelona over, say, Los Angeles or Orlando. Yeah, I think it's more likely at this point. I think, NWSL-wise, I think Angel City would probably be a good option for her. Gotham would probably be a good option for her. I could see Orlando City making that play as well, like I just said. I don't know if you are a player that has, fought for free agency, that has lived through the past 2 years on this league. I think it's a little bit different versus coming into the league this year versus growing through this league in its, formidable years. I think, Debinha may be looking for a change in scenery, a change in league. And it hurts NWSL if Debinha leaves. It's not the end of the world, but it definitely hurts the league quality-wise. So me as a NWSL fan, as someone living in America, I do not want to see Debinha leave. That being said, Debinha on Arsenal, Debinha on Barcelona, I think those would be fantastic games to watch, especially when the Champions League comes around, and I would like to see her in that environment. Maybe it's just a short-term deal. Maybe she signs for 2 years somewhere and then finds her way back to NWSL. She has more years left in her prime, and it would maybe be fun to see her hop over to Europe and see what happens. So, speaking of European players, moving across a body. All right, that's a bad transition. Diani possibly leaving PSG. So, kind of detail. Diani has yet to resign in Paris. And while it isn't a given that she won't agree to terms, she is coming up on the end of that contract, and she has reportedly been in contact with NWSL and Women's Super League clubs. Of course, fill in the blank, a few that might be. Diani is not against the idea of staying in Paris. I'll kind of post this tweet thread up here. It kind of goes into it. But once sporting guarantees for the future at PSG in 27-year-old international, if, say, Debinha leaves, Diani would be a great option for anyone who loses out on the Debinha sweepstakes and would help the quality of the league as well. Diani is a superstar. Has 9 goals in Ligue 1 this season, 3 goals in 393 minutes of Champions League play. She is a player that is often game planned against and the player that stands out when you watch PSG play. I think any team in the league in all over the world would benefit from Diani. So that is an interesting one to keep an eye on. Of course, she had talks break down in 2020 when she was rumored to be leaving PSG for the Portland Thorns. PSG offered her a much larger contract, so maybe that's still the play here. Now, NWSL teams have loosened up a bit. They can offer more money than they could 2 years ago, but there's still that question mark of could they ever compete with a PSG, with a Barcelona, with a Real Madrid, with a Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United in terms of what they can offer a player. And I think that's yet to be seen. But there are some players coming to NWSL with strong futures. Ari Borges signs in Louisville. She's a Brazilian international, a 22-year-old midfielder out of Palmeiras. And she's a very versatile player. Her use at Palmeiras, her use at the Brazilian national team shows that she can be that same style of dynamic midfielder that we talk about with Debinha. She can play as a central midfielder, a wide midfielder, success on either side. She can be a floating midfielder. She can even be a second striker or shadow striker. And that's like exactly the type of player that Racing Louisville needs. Say what you will. I am still just like beyond comprehension that Soccer Holdings LLC has not been made to sell Louisville or disinvest from Louisville, but this is a great pickup for Racing Louisville, and kind of crystallizes, or at least like puts them a tier above where they were last year. And this is the type of player that, especially on that team, can have some growing pains, and it won't be an issue. Louisville was not a good team last year. I think that's well documented for multitude of reasons. Having a young superstar that can grow with this team, I think that's the perfect signing, not just for Louisville, but for Ari Borges as well. Staying in the NWSL for a moment, Mimi Larsson is making her way stateside as well. Larsson playing with FC Rosengard this past season, just finished up Champions League play as Rosengard finished with 0 points. They were in a tough group, and it's going to take a lot for that team to really be competitive. Not that they haven't been in the past, obviously, but that group with where it is right now, it's going to take a little bit of work to be competitive in that group. But Mimi Larsson is exactly the type of forward in the mold of past Casey Curran forwards. I reached out to Mia Eriksson, who is a pundit in Sweden, a very good Swedish football reporter, and asked for a little bit more insight into what type of player Mimi Larsson is. And her description just kind of, if you were to think about what a Kansas City Current forward is, it would be this description. So she was in the Swedish national team for the World Cup in France after a very good spell with Eskilstuna United in the Danfels, whatever, Swedish league. But since she has never really made it, I know she didn't like it herself. And then she signed for Linköping to play as a winger next to Stina Blackstenius and Lena Hurtig, mainly because she saw herself more as a number 9. She signed with Rosengård and has won Swedish league twice with them, but she has never been the top scorer in the league playing with them, so she hasn't been someone that scores and scores. But her off-the-ball work rate is very, very good. She does not back down from a tackle or a more physical encounter. Being used to her best abilities, I know she will take the chance and score 2, though, and I think she fits the NWSL style from what I know about that league. And that tells you exactly what they want and exactly what the mold of the current Kansas City Current forward group is, which begs another question, because coming up with the draft, I could definitely see them being very active. They have quite a few forwards who are probably looking at wanting starting time, and you throw Lynn Williams in that mix too. You have Kristen Hamilton, you have Lola Bonta, CC Kaiser, Claire Lavage when she comes back, and Claire Lavage's injury is going to be one that keeps her out into next season, so maybe it isn't as much of an issue. But you also have Elise Bennett, who kind of grew into her role last season as a super stub, and will probably be looking for starting time at some point. Mimi Larson now being in that mix as well as another player who, is able to come off the bench, is able to start, and is able to be that kind of engine for you that, Lola Bonta and Kristen Hamilton have been, and CC Kaiser as well, just like in that mold. So while her off the ball work makes her like an ideal forward for Matt Potter's system, makes you wonder what the personnel is and if there is some more movement around the draft. And Kansas City Current are not ones to really be afraid to make deals around the draft, as we've seen in past years. And I think this roster is far from being done for building to 2023. So finally, moving into the re-signings of this past week, Victoria Pickett re-signs with Gotham. Gotham reinforcing their young core. Victoria Pickett's 26, was really starting to come into her own last season. She took a big step up in Kansas City from the 2021 season to the 2022 season. Traded to Gotham after Claire Lavage became the starter in Kansas City, and Victoria Pickett needs to start somewhere. So it was kind of a Kansas City got some good allocation money out of it, and Victoria Pickett gets a starting position, and she very much deserves it. She took a little bit to really grow into Gotham system last year, and if you look at what that system was, of course, they had 2 coaches. They're bringing in a new coach this season with Juan Carlos Amoros's project, and they're clearly building up a stronger roster, and they want Victoria Pickett to be that real stable backbone, and I think she can do it. If you look at, there was a game, her last start against OL Reign last season was probably her best game of the year, so she really came into her own towards the end of the year, and that's just it's a good re-signing for Gotham. Yeah, I have no notes. I like Victoria Pickett a lot as a person and as a player, so I wish her nothing but the best. So that's kind of what's going on in the world of women's soccer as of this week, December 24th here. I wrote this piece yesterday. I will link down in the comments below if you want some more stats on the Talkin' Soccer Media publication. Go read along if you want. But thank you so much for watching me. This is last video for the Christmas break. I will be traveling to St. Louis tomorrow morning after we do Christmas stuff with my wife's family today. Christmas, holidays, they're kind of a rough time being away from my family. So I appreciate all of you for coming and hanging out with me. It's been a fun year on the channel. We've started from nothing. We've grown to 150 subscribers, almost 200 subscribers, and been growing pretty well over the past month. So I thank you so much for coming along with the ride as I dive into this and give it more attention. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Even if you just comment that no one watches women's soccer. I appreciate you being here nonetheless. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping in. If this is your first time finding the channel, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, let me know what you think and how you think that Ari Borges and Mimi Larson will do in the NWSL, and where do you think Debinha is going to end up signing at the end of all of this. But for now, we'll talk very, very soon, in a couple of days.